As I said, I know there's a lot of content coming your way, but we're really trying to get stuck into the doing phase. So if we move on to standard 2, we start with 2.1, partnering with older people. And there are 2 high-risk concepts here. We're looking at continuous improvement and diversity. So we've assessed that on the topic of diversity, yes, an educational response is required to address that. And that evidence is coming from page 6 of the evidence mapping framework that I've just shared with you previously. So we can expect that an auditor will request evidence of training on this particular topic. However, if we take continuous improvement for as an example, it has been assessed as high risk because it does feature heavily in those multiple specific legislative frameworks beyond the quality standards. It's in our most recent sector performance report, and we're continuing to see the emphasis on continuous improvement. But we have to think, is education the most appropriate strategy? And in the context of Standard 2, we've said no. So what you'll see within Standard 2, because it most closely maps with our current Standard 8 governance, there are a lot of instances where we have assessed the requirement to be high risk, but education may not be the most appropriate strategy, or it may be combined with another strategy. So keep in mind that you're seeing a lot of requirements here in Standard 2 relating to good governance, and that means effective systems, effective processes in place. So very similar, outcome 2.2, quality and safety culture. Of course, there's moderate risks associated with strategic planning and enterprise. Getting these things wrong can cost an organisation dearly. We know that. And I think it was in the couple of weeks ago, the most recent sector performance report came out, and Commissioner Anderson reiterated that provider governance does remain an issue of concern for the Commission. They stated that it is worrying because poor governance can lead to poor clinical care, and that is where we see our complaints and more serious incidents. So these absolutely are a priority, and the rationale being the recent sector performance report. But again, we're suggesting that education isn't the best vehicle to specifically action this. In 2.3, again, you can see another 2 high-risk concepts. And I mentioned open disclosure as the one to address with education here, and we've got a fabulous module on it. I think it's had almost 3,000 reviews. It's been really, really well evaluated. But on the other higher risk concept of emergency and disaster management, we're really, suggesting that even if it is high risk, it's a new requirement. This initiative needs a different pronged approach to begin with. So education isn't our starting point. We're suggesting that, focus the efforts on putting a good, effective system and process and some internal policies in place first. And once that's occurred, then we'd look at incorporating some education. So, get those processes and systems in place first, and then we can support staff with education on the topic. For 2.4, again, looking at the name of the outcome, risk management. Education's not going to be our primary strategy here, but working with our governing body, our quality and our risk teams, people and culture leaders, we can do a lot of work and groundwork here before education, may be assigned. 2.5, incident management. Clearly, yes, we need education, and we need to be looking at, what is the best approach to responding to incidents. So our SIRS module is the corresponding AusMed module that we recommend here. And it doesn't just explain what SIRS is. It really looks at, how to recognise and report an incident, but what are those principles for an appropriate and compassionate result and response for our organisations. I just wanted to highlight a topic that, may have been glossed over, but I think it's a really worthwhile one to look at within 2.5, and that's contemporary evidence-based practice, or EBP. So what I wanted to show you is that what you're seeing are 6 really high quality modules that form part of a series on evidence-based practice. So you can think of this, I guess, as almost like a clinical leadership skill track. Or education for your clinical leaders, maybe some of your enrolled or registered nurses. And that really talks to, I guess, the development side of learning and development. So just wanted to highlight, as I said, for our AusMed customers, there's some really great modules that don't just focus on the specific requirements, but can help build your clinical leaders within the organisation as well. 2.6, feedback and complaints management, obviously critical, and there's another 2 high-risk concepts here that we believe do absolutely warrant education. Page 45 of our evidence mapping framework, we will see evidence asked about what training and instruction is provided to workers. But I also wanted to highlight that this particular aspect from the evidence mapping framework actually asks for what education and training was provided to workers on what processes the organisation has in place around feedback and complaints management. So again, just another opportunity to show you the importance of combining education or training with a secondary strategy, like looking at your processes and your policies. So being able to combine education with an appropriate process and giving our staff access to that process or that policy is a really nice 2-pronged approach. Here's our relevant modules, and something like customer service, I think, handles these concepts together really beautifully. So you'll see we're starting to see some themes, some modules that relate to more than one outcome are coming up, which is really great that we can handle that particular requirement, or we have one module that handles a few of these requirements. So outcome 2.7, information management. I think, I've said it again, but just an opportunity to really consider that something like informed consent and privacy. We obviously have some fabulous modules on this, but, there's some themes coming through, and we can use, as I mentioned, one module to maybe, tailor to more than one outcome, which is great because I don't know about you, but I'm looking at standard 5 and I'm thinking there are so many really high risk, really prevalent clinical and care skills that sit within standard 5. If we can pull together some, modules within our standards 1 to 4 training plans that help us scale the delivery of education and let us, really fill out standard 5 appropriately, then that reserving of space is going to be really critical for us. So, something like respecting privacy and dignity or consent to treatment, may in fact cover as a module a few different outcomes. 2.8, really critical. None of us would be here without really good workforce planning. We know, it's such an important aspect to an organisation's success. But is education needed to address this? Probably not as a first step. So moderate risk in our eyes, but an educational response not relevant right here, right now, when we're talking about standard 2. Now, this is a really interesting one. Action 2.8.2 on psychological safety. You can see in the box on your left here that there is a clear need for the provider to implement strategies for supporting and maintaining a satisfied and psychologically safe workforce. So this really is a critical topic, but our view is that it doesn't start with education. We really encourage you to be guided by your people and culture leaders within your organisation. Start with defining what success looks like for this particular area. How are you measuring it? What initiatives, what policies and processes do you have in place when it comes to psychological safety? Once you've got that in mind, then we can look at delivering education on the topic. Same for 2.9, again, managing our human resources, our people, absolutely fundamental to delivering the best possible care for our older people. But as a strategy, the primary strategy sits outside of L&D scope. I hope you all took note of this one. 2.96, all workers regularly receive competency-based training in relation to core matters at a minimum. And the list of 7 key concepts and core matters is on the left. We absolutely love this one. We deem it as high risk because there's a specific need for training on these core matters, which is fantastic. We have a lot to get through today, so I don't want to get too bogged down at this stage in competency, but I can share some really exciting things with you. And I've been asked about this. So, for some of those queries that perhaps I haven't been able to answer to date, I can now share with you that AusMed has just given the go-ahead to make a significant investment in further developing our competency assessment tools. So these tools are a companion to our mandatory training modules, and they are designed to assess for competence of skills in a scaffolded way. So this will mean that AusMed customers will have competency tools that align beautifully with the way that training is being delivered by default. So really, really exciting. I can't provide any other information on this at the moment, but what I really recommend is that you come along to the competency workshop webinar that we'll have in a couple of webinars time, and we'll be able to have more to say on the matter then. And again, finishing or rounding out standard 2, outcome 2.10, emergency and disaster management. I think I've probably mentioned it already, that it is high risk, but there are other strategies, at least to begin with, that we recommend. So I don't know about you, but there's a lot to get through.